Hello, and welcome back to Election Time News, your one-stop political summations, poll reviews, non-partisan predictions, reviews, and compilations on other political forecasters. Today is Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. Today is it. It is Election Day. Later today, I'll be doing my live stream. So make sure to check that out. If you are not subscribed, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm still hit 500 subscribers by the end of today. I know I can. So I've gained 20 subscribers in the past 3 days. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for that. So here I made my final prediction video yesterday, and there were some issues, especially with the audio. I forgot to switch the setting on my microphone. It has multiple modes, and it defaults on one with a really high reverb for some reason, and I forgot to change it. So that entire thing is basically messed up, but it's too late now to go back and redo it. So I basically have that as my final prediction video. So there's that. But here is my final explanation video where I'll be going over all of the... Basically, I'll be just going over all of my reasoning for all of these in every single state. This is going to be a really long video. So if you subscribe if you're not already, join the Discord down below. You can see this sheet. It is also linked in the description as well. And now let's get into it. So starting with Alabama. 26 points for Donald Trump. Most expected. Best is 23.5 for the Democrats, 28.5 for the Republicans. So looking here, 26, that is a half-point increase from 2020. I'm expecting that's mainly going to be in the black belt here, which starts out over here in Mississippi, then goes across the state of Alabama and ends right about over here. Of course, here's Atlanta, right up here in the state of Georgia. And here is, I believe, Birmingham, Alabama. And then, of course, there's the Mississippi Delta right here, another blue county blob right over here that almost gets T-boned by this blue belt. This is mainly due to a large black population, and if Kamala Harris is even to lose just a few points here. So looking at the swingometer, if you move the black vote just a bit over, she does lose Georgia, and of course 26 points in Alabama, which is right about where I have it there. Now, of course, there's going to be some gains among, what it looks like there's going to be some gains among non-college educated voters and white college educated voters, but then of course a bit more on the black vote is going to move a bit more red, and then the Hispanic vote as well, which is going to hurt her in quite a few states. The Asian vote's going to drop a bit as well. So expect now, of course, there's going to be some differences in some of these states, so I have to kind of cheese this a little bit to get some of these states. But then you end up with, 6.5 point Ohio, 6 point. Now, these, of course, are going to be way redder than that. But you end up with 0.9. But you end up with 25 point Alabama, which is actually even better than this. But 26 points seems a bit more reasonable. Of course, this isn't going to be exact because demographics vote slightly differently in multiple different states. This is 1%, which is relatively close to the 0.6% that the very reputable pollster out of Nevada just came up with earlier yesterday. So that should be about on par with this. Now, this is just going to be a rough estimate for some of these. So with the state of Alabama, that is going to go red, 9 electoral votes for Donald Trump. Now, Alaska, 9 points. That is a point drop, actually, from 2020. That's going to go certain margin. Looking at some of these polls, there's actually a few in Alaska. Trump up by 10, 8, 8, and 7. That's mainly where this is coming from. Those slightly lower numbers are really where this is coming from. I don't think that's actually going to be all the way up to 10. And again, these are both in the same time period. This is full scope as well. It includes Kennedy, and Trump is actually down by more. Trump's ahead by less. So especially looking at this county map here, we can see that North Slope did, in fact, actually shift. And so you can see the... You can see that North Slope actually flipped. That was probably mostly due to Donald Trump's promises about, oil in that region. However, Anchorage flipped to Biden. And so this is a very relatively left-trending state. It will probably continue to do so. And even though the nation will shift a little bit to the right, potentially, I expect that it will still shift a point to the left. But, of course, not close to anywhere enough to give Kamala Harris the victory in the state of Alaska there. Next, we have the state of Arizona. This is the first big one. 1 point for Donald Trump. That is going to be a swing state in his favor. And so he's been doing relatively well in the polling here. 2.2 points ahead here. and this is basically the last average. The last day we had an average for was November 3rd, and I believe that election day was November 4th last year. So, looking here, we have November 4th, and that's it. That's the last average here, 2.2 points ahead, and that's with, at the very end, Trump +1 right here, a Trump +3 from Insider Advantage, and Emerson College Trump up by 2. So those are all relatively pretty reputable pollsters that have him up by 1 to 2 points. So that is going to be a victory for Donald Trump in the state of Arizona. And that's going to be a bit of a shift. I expect that Maricopa County will move a little bit to the left, probably closer to about 2.5 points. Really not that much to the left, but the rest of the state is going to move quite a bit to the right, especially the Hispanic populations down in Santa Cruz, Pima County, Cochise County. Some of those other counties down there will move back into the Republican column. As you can see here, 0.5 point victory on this swingometer map, but of course that's a bit less specific than that. As you can see here, Arizona is quite a bit Hispanic, but quite a bit white non-college graduate, so that did move it a bit to the left there. So that's going to affect that a bit. Now moving on to Arkansas, 29-point victory for Donald Trump. This is a sweeping victory, 29 points. Contrary to the 26 here, I think that the population is probably not going to move much. It was 27.5. So this is actually quite a bit of a jump up for Donald Trump. This is like the perfect demographic to actually move towards him this election cycle. Not very educated, relatively white, and very relatively rural state as well. In general, this is probably going to basically just stay for Donald Trump. Most of this region out here, and of course the small amounts of black population right here might also move a bit to the right as well. Moving on next to the state of California, this is going to go blue for Kamala Harris by a relatively large margin, like always it does for the Democrats pretty much at this point. 27 points for Kamala Harris in her home state. That is a 2.25 point reduction from Joe Biden. I expect there's going to be a bit less, especially on the eastern part of the state, especially after Donald Trump did campaign in, I believe it was either Riverside or San Bernardino County down here, potentially up here somewhere. I don't exactly remember, but it was definitely not on the very deep west coast. This is basically not going to move, but I would expect that some of this region would definitely move a bit, and we're going to see just even small amounts in Los Angeles. It's such a large county that even just a 1 point shift would lose a lot of votes in the state. So, as a whole, I think the state of California is going to move a bit to the right, but not close to enough to actually give it anything. Of course, here on the swingometer, 25-point victory. Here we actually have it 27, so that's actually overestimating the swingometer on this one. Now, moving on, next is going to be the state of Colorado. I have a 12-point victory. This is a bit less than Joe Biden did in 2020. That's going to be a 13.5-point victory. I expect that there's going to be continual more blue movement in, some of these outer regions of the suburbs, but Denver, there's so much room for the Democrats to lose here. 61% margin here. It's the most left-trending state in the entire country. I think that Grand County might even flip a bit. Alamosa County might flip back. It was 2.1 for Clinton. But some of these suburban counties are going to move a bit to the left, but not enough to actually counteract some of these more central city movements towards the slight shifts towards the right. Now, next after Colorado is going to be the state of Connecticut. 19-point victory for Kamala Harris here on my sheet here. Now looking here, 13.5 for Harris right here. That's actually a bit more than Joe Biden did. 20 points here. Which is quite a bit over what I have here. Quite a bit of white population here, but they do tend to actually vote Democratic, so I don't think it's actually going to move all that much. 19-point victory there. That's basically just based on a 1 point deduction from Joe Biden. He had very strong performance along the coastline here, and I think that's going to deteriorate a small amount, as we've seen quite a bit in these urban regions. Bit of lost support for the Democratic Party in those areas. Same thing in the state of Delaware, 18-point margin right there. 18 points compared to Joe Biden's 19. That's another point deduction. Newcastle County is probably going to drop a little bit. Sussex is probably going to get bluer, and Kent County is probably just barely going to stay blue, albeit dropping a small amount there. But that is probably going to be a margin that's going to be able to hold on for her. The 18.5 points on the demographics, that's right about on that area there. Next, District of Columbia, 87.5. So here, 87.5, only 81.5 there, but it's such a blue region that I think that demographics aren't really going to shift much. 86 3/4 there. I think that actually it is going to increase a bit more just because it's some of that more urban region sort of thing. Plus, it's just so blue that it's tough to kind of gauge where it'll move at this point. It's so saturated already that it's relatively tough to see how it'll move in the future. Then we have the state of Florida, 5-point victory for Donald Trump. This is a huge win for him. He absolutely needs these 30 electoral votes. 3.5, that's going to be a 1.5-point victory. So that's going to be a gain of more than he won by in 2016 as far as raw margins go. And looking at the polls in the state of Florida, we can see that Donald Trump is currently ahead by 6.6. He's been expanding his lead since he was ahead by about 4 in the beginning of October. So we have a Trump plus 4, Trump plus 9. This one, Morning Consult, relatively large. Trump plus 5, then Trump plus 7, Trump plus 4 for focal data. Trump plus 4 for the most efficient one, 1,100 registered voters and full field. But that doesn't really matter here, as it's still going to be a relatively high margin of victory. But looking interestingly here, it's only a 4.2 victory right there. But again, Florida tends to be a bit more of a right-leaning demographic, even though it's, just general demographics-wise, it would be a bit more left-leaning, you'd expect, just purely based on those statistics. And you have the state of Georgia. This is going to be a tilt-red state as well, and that is going to be a 1/4 point victory for Donald Trump. Here on, it's 9/10 of a point, just because of this high up black vote. But if you bump this down a little bit, you know, with a 4/10 point victory. So this actually looks a bit more on par with what I'd be seeing. 4/10 point victory here. 13% is still a bit much, but just because of that demographic, it's very religious, so you're going to have to adjust a bit more for that religiosity. They're going to definitely be a bit more conservative. The polls in Georgia have been, they're very tight, within a point, so it's definitely within the margin of error at this point. Trump plus 1 on this recent one. Again, Atlas Intel, relatively far off, but Emerson College, Trump plus 1, they're a relatively good pollster this cycle, it looks like. And so we're going to have that there, Trump plus 2, but again, that's Patriot Polling, that's a right-wing pollster there. Looking next, after the state of Georgia, we have is the state of Hawaii. It's going to be a 27-point margin for Kamala Harris. That's still quite a bit of a shift down. Here it's 26, so that might not be that far off, but 29.5 for Biden. But mainly that's going to be because of this shift in the Asian vote here. Quite a bit of Asian and other right here, as you can see, 51% of the population. So that shift is definitely going to affect things in the state of Hawaii. I don't think it's going to be that drastic. Even that big of a shift from 29.5 down to 27 is going to be relatively large in and of itself, but I think that Kamala Harris is still going to carry the state by quite a bit. Then we're going to have, of course, is going to be the state of Idaho. 31 points for Donald Trump. That's not going to be much of a question there. That is the wrong state. It went for Trump by 30 3/4 last cycle. 31, that's only a 1/4 point gain, as there's really not much else to be done here. It's basically already maxed out. You're not really going to get much out of Blaine County, out of Tatum County. There's really not much else to get out of Idaho. It's basically already completely maxed out. Here we have 28, actually, which is quite a bit of a drop. I don't think it's actually going to drop by all that much. Next, going to be the state of Illinois, 16 points for Kamala Harris. That's going to be a hold there. Here, 16.5. But I don't think it's actually going to be all that strong. It's only going to be a 1-point drop, which is probably going to be a lot out of Cook County. That 50-point margin is going to drop. You're going to see more movement to the left in McLean County, probably Sangamon County, Champaign County. Some of these more suburban counties are going to continue to move to the left. But this deep blue area, DuPage, Cook, and Lake County, are going to move to the right a bit because there are those deep urban regions. Those more black voters are going to be moving more to the right as we've continued probably about a point or so at the most, but we're going to be seeing more of that again. And then next is going to be the state of Indiana, 16.5-point margin for Donald Trump. So now Kamala Harris is at 100, and now Donald Trump's at 90. So here that's going to be 16 points up to 16.5. It's not going to be all that much, but it's quite a bit of it's a relatively suburban state as far as right up here goes. LaPorte County, St. Joseph County, Porter County, Lake County, Marion, Hamilton, Monroe, Tippecanoe County, all suburban. Now, all of these are going to be more rural counties. Now, of course, the weird thing is looking in 2008 at how much was blue, but since then it's all shifted very hard to the right. And so now we're seeing, some more movement again in these suburban counties. Is going to be moving to the left. However, the state as a whole is still probably going to move to the right a bit again, towards Donald Trump. Looking here at this is going to be 14 and a quarter down there. That's quite a bit of a shift there. Now, 7 points for Iowa. The explanation here is basically that one poll. Yes, I'm saying that's going to weigh it, but it's very reputable pollster, and it's Harris up by 3. So I didn't move it all that much, but that's still going to be enough that right before the election, this is actually when polls really matter. And now, yes, this 435 likely voters, Trump plus 8. 501 registered voters, Trump plus 7. But I still have it only going by 7. Again, that's going to be right on par with their poll here, Trump plus 7. But it's still going to be relatively another considerable drop. It's going to be another point drop, like from 2016 to 2020. So that's going to be probably more movement right around here on some of these somewhat more rural suburban areas over here. These cities are more suburban than actual urban, so they might move more to the left as well. Again, looking at 2008, a lot of the state was very blue, and then it moved red, and then very, very red for Donald Trump in 2016, and then it stabilized for Biden in 2020. But I think that it is still going to go quite a bit to the right. Here's 6-point margin on the swingometer. So 7 points doesn't seem all that far off. Kansas is going to be 13 points. It's going to be another point swing to the left. It's actually a left trending state, believe it or not. Here, 13-point margin right there on the swingometer. 14.5 for Donald Trump in 2020 after 20.5 in 2016. That is a 6-point shift to the left. That is huge, especially in a state that, voted to keep their, shut down a constitutional amendment, actually, that banned abortion on the ballot, or had abortion ban. So this is probably, I think, if anything, going to be a state that might surprise quite a few people on election night on how far to the left it moves. It's not going to go for Harris, but I think that it is definitely going to be a bit closer than most people might think. Kentucky, 26 points for Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump takes the lead with 110 electoral votes. Now, he has gotten over 100. Kentucky here, 23 points. 26 right here. I have a lot of confidence is actually going to hold. That's going to be just a bit more, just because there's not much to move here. If the whole state basically moves a bit to the left, but the urban regions move to the right, those will basically cancel out, and you'll end up with basically a flat 26-point margin, again, like in 2020. Louisiana, now here, 18 and a quarter. I have 18 and a half, so it's not too that far off here. Louisiana was by 18 and a half last cycle, so I think that those these regions are generally going to be continuing to be more Republican. I think that Louisiana, more than any of them, is going to be a more stable state, as it actually only moved from 19.5 to 18.5 in 2020, and 17.5 to 19.5 in 2016. It doesn't seem to move all that much with general national shifts, so I think if anything, it's not going to move by all that much. Maine, statewide, is going to be a certain margin. That's going to be an 8 3/4 margin here. That's a weird sounding one, but looking at the polls here in the state of Maine, Maine as a whole, plus 11 from this left-leaning pollster. So that's going to be a bit. Survey USA has Harris plus 8. So both of those basically going together, and then you have Biden plus 9. It seems like not that big of a shift. Maine as a whole is going to go by 11 on this one, surprisingly enough. But probably more 10 on a good night for the Democrats. 22 is going to be for the second one. That's basically right on par with the swingometer here, if I remember right from what I just saw. 25, actually. So, no. 22, I think that the swingometer is actually overestimating them a little bit. 24 right here. So this one's saying 25 is even more than, this left-leaning pollster. So I don't think that's actually going to swing that hard to the left from where it was, as in 2020, it voted for Biden by 23, and I think it's going to move a bit to the left, as again, this is a ridiculously urban region, a lot of very dense Democratic counties right there. And in contrast, actually, I think one of the few regions that Harris might be able to do a bit better in is actually going to be Maine's 2nd Congressional District. 6 3/4 points. That is still going to be a likely margin here, but 6 3/4 points. It's actually going to be 3/4 of a point better than Donald Trump did in 2020. So that's going to be a bit of a shift in that direction there. Looking here, this actually has a 5-point victory for Donald Trump, so that's even closer than that. But it's a white working class population. So if the Democrats do end up gaining with those sort of populations, that's going to be the number one region to see those gains. Maryland is going to be the next part. So we have 32 right there. 32-point margin. That's going to be a bit less than Joe Biden did, and that's probably going to be mainly on the northern part where there might have been some white working class voters that Biden managed to get an appeal to. This region is probably going to stay very, very blue as the Washington, D.C., the D.C. suburb region is continuing to grow, especially around this region around Baltimore. Those are continuing to be very, very blue. It's one of the bluest states in the nation. It's not going to move all that much. Massachusetts, 32-point margin, and that's going to be 124 to 119 now. Kamala retakes the lead. We're going to have a margin 33.5 last cycle, 32. That's only going to be a 1.5-point loss. Looking here, 33.5 again. Interestingly, from the swingometer, but I think that it's actually going to follow the rest of the nation and is going to move to the right a bit. Michigan, we have a 1.5-point victory for Kamala Harris. This is a crucial state that she absolutely needs to win on the swingometer. 4-point victory, which is absolutely not happening this cycle, but 3-point victory for last cycle, and then the cycle before that, 1/4 of a point for Donald Trump. Looking at the polls in the crucial state of Michigan, we have Harris up by a point here. Harris up by 2 on this one. Trafalgar Group came up even. Patriot Polling, a right-wing pollster, came up Harris +1. Insider Advantage, even. Atlas Intel could only cough up a Trump +2. Emerson College, Harris +2. So this is almost securely a Democratic state at this point. 1.5 points on my projection here. Minnesota, 7.25. Tim Walz is going to help this ticket a bit, but it's generally just been a relatively left-leaning state. The margins have calmed down a bit, gotten a bit closer, but Harris +5, Harris +7, those aren't necessarily all that close as far as that goes. Biden won the state by 7.1, so this is actually another state that I think is going to increase just a slightest bit on the swingometer. We actually have 8.75 points, but I don't think it's going to swing that hard. I don't think the rurals are going to move all that much as far as that goes, but we do still have some indication of potential movement there. Mississippi, 16 points for Donald Trump. That's just barely safe on a 15-point scale. 16.25 points right there, so that's right about on par with where I have it. It went to Trump by 16.5 last cycle, so that's actually a bit of a deduction there. But just because of, again, more of it's actually not going to be the black belt over here that's going to be getting more blue. It's going to be the rest of the state that might be getting a bit more blue, even by a point or two. But again, I could see it going up to 18 points for Donald Trump. Missouri, 16% for the former president, 16 points. That's going to be 0.5 point more than in 2020. And looking here, we actually have 13.5 on the swingometer. That's, again, going to be quite a bit more movement because basically the entire state, other than St. Louis, Boone County, and Jackson County, are going to be very predominantly white rural regions, like the rest of the Midwest right out here. But I don't think it's actually going to move all that hard to the left. Same thing with the state of Montana, where on the demographic thing it's 14, but it's probably not going to move that hard to the left. It's going to stay relatively strong. It voted for Trump by 16.5, so right about on that spot. That's not going to be enough to bring the Senator Jon Tester to victory there. Nebraska statewide is going to be 20 points for Donald Trump. 20%. That on the swingometer we have here, it's only going to be 17, but I doubt it's going to be such that large of a movement. 19 points right there. That's going to be a 1-point gain for Donald Trump. I think we do actually have some polls in Nebraska, as they typically do statewide. He's ahead by 16.5 in the polls, so that's actually quite a bit less than I expected. I don't think it's actually going to move that hard to the left. Looking here, of course, the 3rd district is going to vote Trump by a ridiculous amount. But it is literally the most right voting region in the entire country that gets any electoral votes. Dan Osborne came up with a poll of Trump +18, so it is absolutely not competitive whatsoever. It's probably going to go about 20 points for Donald Trump. The first district is going to go for Donald Trump, most likely around 14.5 points or so, just like the last cycle. It actually is a bit of a left shifting region. It's somewhat suburban on some of these outer counties right here that have, quite a bit considerable populations, which is kind of how you can tell they're suburban. They have to be somewhat dense, unlike some of these ones, which have, just a few thousand voters, even just a few hundred. But you have, Lancaster County and some of those other counties right around there. Oops. And so, based on that, you can tell that generally that's a somewhat left-trending region as well, as it went 20 in 2016, but only 15 in 2020. That's a left-trending region, so I think it actually will vote a bit to the left here. As you can see here, only Trump plus 8 by YouGov. I don't think it's going to shift that hard to the left. Here you can see 13 on the swingometer, so even that has less faith in it moving to the left than The Economist does. I do have that safely going for Trump. And then the second congressional district is going to be a certain margin for Kamala Harris, 8 points. The swingometer has it going by 7.5. So I'm actually a bit bullish on their chances here, honestly. It's the perfect demographic to move to the left. Harris plus 8 in this most recent poll by YouGov. Unfortunately, only 393 likely voters. But it voted for Biden by 6.5 points, and I'd be surprised if it didn't vote another 1.5 points to the left. This is the perfect demographic to move to the left. It's a very suburban region, generally somewhat college-educated. It's a suburban-urban region right there. That's like the perfect demographic that's moving to the Democratic Party. Then, of course, Nebraska's 3rd district is ridiculously right-leaning, probably about, I have it going to Trump by 50 points here. This is a huge margin. It doesn't even matter. It could go anywhere from 40 to like 57.5, and I wouldn't be surprised because it's just so red that it's kind of like the inverse of Washington, D.C. Nevada, I do have going for Kamala Harris. So this is going to be a narrow one. I think this is going to be one last squeeze out of the state of Nevada. 1.2 on the swingometer. And looking here, 2.4, that's going to be halving the margin in the state of Nevada from last cycle. Nevada here is, Trump actually pulled ahead it by 0.3 recently, but only because of these Atlas Intel polls. Patriot polling came out even. Emerson College came out even. New York Times Siena College has been weird, but they do have 2 and 3 right there. Focal data up by 1. 4 for registered voters, full field. So, and these very, very end polls have been getting relatively close. Of course, Atlas Intel again messing it all up with their +6s, but I do have it saying very, very close, and it's probably going to be down to the edge, and because of how close it is, we're probably not going to get the call until Friday out of the state of Nevada. Next is going to be the state of New Hampshire, Democrat, likely margin, 7 points, just under a certain margin here, 7.5 point margin for Biden, and this actually, the swingometer actually has it going by 9.5, but that's mainly because of those college non-educated voters that are typically voting out there. I think there's going to be some shifts out more in some of these rural regions, but some of these central regions are probably going to move a bit more to the right. So that's going to kind of cancel all that all out. In New Hampshire, we have polls 5-point victory here. The Dartmouth poll up by 28, which is, not something you'd see every day out of New Hampshire. That appears to be an outlier. As you can see, the points are right out there, right here and here. But, other than that, it appears to be, Harris plus 5 here for these two, which has been contracting the average quite a bit. But I do think that she'll still carry the state by about 7 points. New Jersey's 15-point margin. That is going to be safe. That's going to be less than it was in 2020, as Biden carried it by 16. Here in the demographics, we can, on the demographic shift, flat 15 right there, which completely supports that, as the Hispanic vote is going to move to the right a bit, and New Jersey actually does have a bit of a demographic that has a bit of Hispanic population. I think this is 13.2, that's Black African American, 11.7% Hispanic Latino. Actually have a 13% Black population, so that moving to the right as well will definitely move the state as a whole towards the GOP this cycle. Next is going to be in the state of New Mexico. That's going to be certain, 8.5-point victory. The swingometer actually has it down to 7 because of the loss in the Hispanic vote, but I don't think it's actually going to move all that much. New Mexico doesn't move all that much unless for huge shifts nationwide. Victory Insights has her up by 5. Survey USA up by 6. Research and Polling, Albuquerque Journal has that up by 9. I don't think it's going to be that far for Kamala Harris. But I do think that she's going to secure the state, and it's 5 electoral votes for for another cycle for the Democratic Party. And so sorry about that. I had to quickly go for a second. 6.3 points in the polling average. Again, of course, swingometer 7 points. I do think it's going to be 8.5, though. Not going to be that big of a shift right there. 20 points in the state of New York. This is a huge shift, actually. Especially compared to the even right here 21.8, because those gains amongst the less educated part of the state. 68%, right, basically 69% of the population of the state of New York is in those demographics that Democrats are expected to gain in. So 22 points right there. That's still compared to Joe Biden's 23-point victory. I think it's actually going to go down to 20, but it very well could be up to 24, which actually would be a slight gain. But it's mainly going to be, losses all across some of these regions. Losses especially in New York City. A bit in, Albany as well. Erie. There's going to be Niagara Falls. Monroe County. I forget what city's right there, but quite a few losses in some of those regions. There were actually a few polls in the state of New York. There were actually a few polls in the state of New York. Harris had by 16.3 right now. I don't think it's actually going to be that big of a shift, just because that would be a huge shift. I don't expect there's actually going to be that big of a drop in the state of New York. Those sorts of shifts are not usually seen in one state. They're usually seen in at least a region, or if not the entire country. So I expect that it's probably going to actually not be as extreme as some of those polls are suggesting. North Carolina, 0.5 point for Donald Trump. This is a relatively close state here, so the swingometer has it 1 point for Donald Trump here. That's actually going to be 1.25. That's actually going to be the closest that North Carolina has been since Obama won it in 2008. And, of course, since before that, it hadn't gone blue since Jimmy Carter in 1976, of course. So that's quite a bit out in front of that. So now we're going to move on after North Carolina. Of course, is going to. I don't think it's going to shift. I don't think it's actually going to be a bit bluer, just because of some of these more suburban regions here, especially outside here that we saw shift relatively hard to the left from 2016 to 2020. And some of them actually shifted red and then actually shifted back blue. Other ones shifted red and then got even redder. But in some of these outside of the city regions, we did see them move a bit to the left. That may be an indicator of continual leftward movement in the state of North Carolina, or it could just be a complete false sign here altogether. North Dakota, 34 points for Donald Trump. That's not that big right here. 30 points for the demographics, but these extreme states are really going to be the ones that are going to hurt the most. 33 points there. So that's going to be another slight gain for Donald Trump, as we should be expecting basically across the rest of the country if he is just to perform better in general. State of Ohio is going to be next. That's going to be a 7-point victory for Donald Trump. There's been some more recent polling here that actually suggests that it may be a bit closer than expected. 8.8 points. Emerson colleges have Trump up by 11 there, but Morning Consult up by 9. Focal Data up by 9. This one up by 7. Trafalgar Group up by 6. This is huge. Miami University Department Center, Trump plus 3. Even if it's a left pollster, that's still huge. So some of these very close polls out of the state of Iowa, as well as that poll in Iowa, which could help, in the general Rust Belt / Midwest region there, could indicate a slight leftward movement in the state of Ohio. I don't think it's going to be that large. Probably only about, again, 7-point victory for Donald Trump still, but that is still going to be a point less than his victories in 2016 and in 2020. And for the demographic shift, 6.25 points. So that's even less than that. And I think that Harris could end up down to 5 points or so, but I don't think it's actually going to be all that close. Next up, we do have the pivotal swing state of next is going to be Oklahoma, and then is going to be Oregon, and then is Pennsylvania. So Oklahoma is going to be 31 points here. That's, again, not a very blue state whatsoever. 31.2 here, actually. 33 points in 2020. If any of these states are just going to happen to move to the left, it's going to be Oklahoma, just because it's so far red that it can only really move. If it's going to move at all, it's going to move to the left. There's really not much that can be done here by the Democrats. 36.5 down to 33. It could definitely move to the right. I could see it going up to about 36 points or so. But I think right now it's probably going to be 31, 32 points on election night. There's really not much movement there, but no matter what, it's still going to be a very red state. 15.5 for the state of Oregon for Kamala Harris here. We have a 17-point victory here. I don't think it's going to be quite that large. It went for Biden by 16 points. I think there actually has been some polling here, but it's going to need some really old ones. This one only has Harris up by 12, and it's a left-wing pollster, but that was half a month ago. There actually may be some movement going on in Oregon that we might not be seeing because there's been rough polling for the Democrats the entire cycle. So that's definitely a potential concern for the Democrats, especially in future cycles. Some of this eastern region over here, and especially down here, everything except for right around Portland, may be moving it to the right. So that is definitely something that the Democrats should be concerned about. Pennsylvania, 1% for Kamala Harris. This is going to be an absolute keystone state for her to win. Pun absolutely intended here. Absolutely evenly split. However, since Trump held the lead last, it's going to be red there. But Survation, Harris up by 3. Research Co. Trafalgar can only get Trump plus 2. Patriot Polling can only get Trump plus 1. Insider Advantage, Trump up by 1. Atlas Intel can only cough up Trump plus 2. Emerson College is Trump up by 1. So a few of these recent ones, I could see Trump winning Pennsylvania by up to a point, which is actually better than his 2016 margin, where he only won the state by 3/4 of a point. But as of right now, I see that Kamala Harris will win the state by a slight amount. Here on the demographic shifter, on the swingometer, we 2.25 points. It's not going to go that blue. So I'm definitely going to diverge from the swingometer here again. 1 point or so. It's going to be ridiculously close no matter which way it ends up swinging on election night. Next, we have the state of Rhode Island, 20-point margin for Kamala Harris. This is not going to be a close state by any means. It never really has been for a while. 21 for Joe Biden here on the swingometer. We can look 21 points. Looking in closer at the state, basically the entire state's very blue. Now, interestingly, Kent County did flip. Was just under 3/4 of a point for Trump in 2016, and then it went to 7.5 for Biden. So it did shift very hard to the left. At least Kent County did. It was 15.5 for Clinton, and then 21 for Trump. So I think it's going to be 20 points. Very slight loss in the state of Rhode Island, and it's definitely still going to be a blue state when it comes down to it on election night. South Carolina, 11.75 points for Donald Trump. This is a good state for Donald Trump to expand his lead on, even though it's going to be, albeit narrowly, because you have this entire not very rural, semi-rural, ex-urban white population that could move towards the Democratic Party on this side of the state, and you still have a strong black population on this side of the state. So it's probably not going to move much. The swingometer actually has it a Trump plus 11 victory here, which is absolutely not going to happen. It's too far here. 12.3 after, this, not many polls here. Trump plus 12, Trump plus 17. So Trump plus 12 or so sounds about right as far as that goes. That's a 1/4 point more than he won it by in 2020. So then next we're going to have the state of South Dakota. That's going to be 3 electoral votes for Donald Trump by 27 points. That's going to be a point, 3/4 of a point more than in 2020. 23.5 on here. That's going to, again, be quite a bit shifted to the left because that's an extreme state right there. They're going to be the highest margin of error on all of these states as far as those go. And so we're looking here, again, this entire chunk of the state could potentially move left, but it's a rural region, so it's probably going to end up moving to the right like the rest of the nation does. Rural regions tend to move towards the Republicans when the nation does as a whole. Tennessee, 22.5 points for Donald Trump. This is going to join the nice solid block down here that Donald Trump has and the Republicans have had for the last few cycles here. Tennessee actually only goes by 21.5 here. I have it going by 22.5 as it went for Trump by 23.25. So that's actually going to be dropping a bit just because of some of these. The overall movement in Tennessee is a bit to the left, especially in some of these outer regions here. Haywood County actually got a bit bluer, But Hamilton County, conversely, got a bit bluer. Or sorry, Haywood County got redder. But Shelby County got bluer, Davidson County got bluer, and I think the entire state as a whole did get a little bit bluer, quite a bit over here. Some central regions actually got a bit redder, but this entire area over here got bluer, so that's going to definitely help move the state a bit more if that is to happen again in this election cycle, even though the country as a whole move a bit to the right, such as Texas, 7.5-point victory. That's actually a certain margin here. 5.5-point victory in 2020, aided by Williamson and Tarrant County, Collin County, Bell County, movement in Hayes County, a lot of movement in Hayes County. Harris, Fort Bend, Dallas County, Denton County, all of them. Large shifts to the left for Joe Biden here. Huge wins in some of those, except for the rightward shifts in the Rio Grande Valley. Those were insanely large shifts. You look at some of these, this entire region, deep red. So 19, 24, 40 points towards Donald Trump. 32, 28, 13. So if we continue anything like that, we could absolutely see the state as a whole going towards the right, which we absolutely will, considering that some of these polls out of this state have been looking really rough for Kamala Harris. 7.75 behind in the current average so far. 7 and 8 here. Morning consult, Trump up by 7. That's right around where my average is here. Actually, 7.5% for the demographics is right about where I have it. Swingometer directly agrees with me right there. 7.5-point victory, which absolutely brings Trump up and actually into the lead a bit right here after he has been trailing for a long time. Moving on next is going to be the state of Utah, which is going to be a 19-point victory. This is actually a leftward trending state, believe it or not. It's kind of a quote-unquote sleeper shifter. It moved very much to the left between 2008 and 2020, especially considering that, even Mitt Romney was on the ticket. It even continued to shift to the left. 18.5-point victory here. I have it a 19-point victory for Donald Trump. Of course, there's no polls because it is still a deeply red state, but it's actually going to shift a bit to the left. 1.5 points I have here. And it's mainly because of people moving to Salt Lake City here, which does, of course, vote blue. And then Grand County actually flipped 11 points to the left, if not more, in the last cycle. Vermont is the bluest state in the nation. It is going to go blue by a large margin. I have 35 here. The swing-o-meter actually has 37, but here 35.5. It's actually going to be a half-point drop, just because of some of this. Range up in the northern section is probably going to end up moving a bit to the right in general, but some of it is probably going to be there might be some gains right around here in these very deep blue counties right next to New Hampshire, down Windsor, Windham County are basically maxed out already. So if anything, there's probably going to be some more rightward movement in some of these more rural regions in the state itself. And then Virginia is going to be a certain margin, 9 points. This is going to be a 1-point drop from 2020. It's actually not going to be that large of a drop. I think that the polls are actually overestimating Donald Trump, especially in the state of Virginia. 6.3%. This recent one only up by 6. Here's some strategies. Harris up by 1 is just ridiculous to me. I doubt that's going to come true. Roanoke College, Harris up by 10. Senegal up by 8. So some of those more recent ones up by 9 seems to be relatively plausible. Here, up by 10.1. That's literally the margin that Joe Biden won it by in 2020, which I doubt will happen again. I think it's going to drop a bit, especially with, some of these more western regions are probably going to vote a bit more Republican. These are probably going to continue to move to the left. This region is going to move to the left more. But I think some of these, these ones, more like 15, 20, are going to move more to the right, so that's going to cancel out that leftward movement, which is probably going to be slowed this cycle due to increased support in the urban regions for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. 18.5 points for the state of Washington here. That's going to be a safe blue state, bringing Harris right up there. All she needs to do is win one more state other than Wyoming here in order to win the presidency. So now we have Washington, 19 points for Joe Biden here. Looking at the swingometer, 19.5. But I only have it going by 18.5. It went for Biden, of course, again by 19. That's going to be 3/4 of a point drop here, which is probably to be expected as nationwide. We're probably going to see a bit less. 3.5-point margin I have for the popular vote, which is actually going to probably be a bit of an overestimation. So probably closer to about 3 flat. But Joe Biden did win the popular vote by about 4 points, so that's still going to be a 1-point drop nationwide, which is probably going to move the state as a whole. Now, Clallam County is basically the last true bellwether county, so be watching that on election night. That is the one last bellwether county on the entire country that shows how the country goes, the country voted for Joe Biden by about 4 points, and it voted for Biden by 3. And in 2016, it voted for Trump by 3. The nation actually did vote for Clinton, but Trump, of course, won the election. It went for Obama in 2012 and in 2008. In 2004, it went for Bush. In 2000, it went for Bush, even though technically Gore might have won, but I'm not going to get into that. Clinton in 1996, Clinton in 1992. And then we don't have any county information for 1988 or earlier, but since 1992, you can see it has voted for the winner every single time. So we should be watching that county, and its streak might end, but that would be very disappointing, of course. West Virginia is going to be a 35-point victory for Donald Trump. I think that, looking here, 35.5, and that's even going to be swinging quite a bit. 39. So that's actually going to be quite a bit of a shift to the left, actually. I think I might have actually mistyped that. Probably closer to 37.5, 35 on a good night, actually. So, but this is probably going to be more of that college-educated vote in, regions like Kanawha County. We're going to see Monongalia County flip. We're going to have a blue county in the state of West Virginia for the first time since 2008. And we are going to see some movement in potentially Marion County as well. And Kanawha County, we're going to see some movement in, Wayne County, Brooke County, Jefferson County. Some of those are starting to move back a little bit away from the heavy Republican column. Wisconsin is going to be the state that's going to push Kamala Harris over the edge, give her 276, 1 point victory. That's actually going to be even more than Joe Biden did, just because I think there's going to be enough turnout here. We're going to see some movement in Racine, Kenosha, Waukesha, Ozaukee. We're going to see movement in Brown County, Outagamie County, because these are more suburban counties. Some of these rurals are basically maxed out. Door County is going to move to the left. Kewaunee is going to move to the left. Some of these more other suburban counties are going to move to the left. The urban cores are going to move a bit to the right, but I think that there's enough suburban counties, La Crosse, Eau Claire, Bayfield, Ashland, Douglas, Door, Brown, Outagamie, all of those moving a bit to the left. Winnebago County as well, that are probably going to counteract the slight movements in the rurals as well as the movements in the urban cores to actually increase that margin for the Democratic Party this cycle. I could see Trump winning it by up to 2, which would be more than doubling his margin from 2016, where he won it by 0.75%. But as of right now, I do see enough support for Kamala Harris that she will win the state of Wisconsin. And Wyoming, finally, 44 points for Donald Trump, the most Republican state in the entire country. They voted for Trump by 43.5. Here on the swingometer, 40.5 there. Wisconsin's 2.5 for for Harris there. 44 points here. I do not see any real reason that I would vote there. And of course, looking back at the polls for Wisconsin, Harris is ahead by a point. This recent one, Trafalgar Group, actually came up with Harris +1. Patriot Polling, even. Insider Advantage, actually Trump +1. Atlas Intel can only cough up Trump +1. Harris +3 by Research Company. So all of those are very, very close, but they are a slight Harris favor. Of course, they do have a lot of error, but there's a chance that it may be in favor of Democrats this cycle. And there's been quite a bit of data that has actually been outlining that. So there's a chance that it might be let out there, which is my entire reasoning for my complete electoral map there, which is going to be 276 for Kamala Harris, 262 for Donald Trump. Very narrow victory for Kamala Harris. And now I'll get into a bit more detail here, actually. So the greatest chance that if there's any state that Trump is most likely to flip out of this, it's going to be the state of Wisconsin. It is the most Republican-friendly as far as demographics go. I have Donald Trump with a 45% chance of winning the state still, which is the same as in Pennsylvania, albeit it's actually, I should probably get this down to about 42.5 as the early vote data is looking relatively good. And so, it's the least educated, it is the most rural out of the three, and if they're going to split again, it's going to be Wisconsin breaking off. If anything, the early vote data actually looks a bit better in Pennsylvania than in it actually looks better than Pennsylvania in Wisconsin currently, but I think that the election night vote is actually going to come in with the Republican vote coming in there, even though there's a strong show out in the vote there. And if there's any state that Kamala Harris is most likely to flip, it's probably actually going to be Arizona. Now, you might say it's probably going to be Georgia due to that black vote share, but it's such a large black vote that even 1% drop would absolutely destroy her quite a bit of chances in the state of Georgia. 2% would be almost completely detrimental. And looking at some of the early vote here, especially out of, Fulton County, has not been looking good for Democrats so far. So I think it's almost completely certain to go for the Republicans at this point. Not completely certain whatsoever. Actually, it's 60% to 40%. But I have Arizona at 55%. Georgia, I actually have the most likely to go Republican out of any of them, matter of fact. North Carolina is 57.5%. And so those being the three swing states I think will go for Trump. Georgia is the least likely to go blue. Then is going to be North Carolina, and then is Arizona. I think that Arizona is very likely to go blue out of any of them just because of Maricopa County. It is a very suburban county. It's the perfect demographic, again, to shift to the left. I think it's still going to go to the left this cycle. And if the Democrats can hold on to the Hispanic vote in some of these counties, especially across the rest of the state, it will absolutely help them carry the state. And if anything, if they do end up winning, and I expect they'll win it by a bit more than in 2020, actually, increasing their margins a bit there. If they manage to hold on to their vote in the Hispanic vote, you can see a half-point victory for Kamala Harris in the state of Arizona, as well as breaking down the margins in Georgia. But then you actually have a further left Georgia than North Carolina again. So any losses for the black vote, again, of course, would be detrimental in that situation. So that's entirely in depth for all of those predictions. Let me know of any opinions you have in the comments, of course. And I hope to see you all later today for my live stream. Do not miss that. Thank you all and have a fabulous rest of your day.